Welcome back to our study in the book of Romans. This is the Sonship Review Part 7, and this is session 26. Okay. To translate that into miles, we're talking here just at that short interval between the sessions. A furlong, one furlong equals 1/8 of a mile. So there's 8 of them in a mile. Now, if that's the... Now, here I'm going to do it for you both ways. In other words, is it 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000? Or is it 12,000 all the way around? I mean, when he measured the city, and the length and the breadth of it are equal. So they're either all 12,000 or the length and the breadth all the way around is 12,000. I'm going to do it for you both ways. How many what happened to everybody? Just for grins, how many of you think it's 12,000 all the way around? How many think it's 12,000 each? Yes, it is. Exactly. It actually is. It is. So, And that's the problem with the map. But it's not as big as the other way either. Because let's do it like this. If you say, let's say A is the total. The total is 12,000 furlongs. And B is going to be each side is 12,000 furlongs. Okay, Clifford got on his calculator and did that up. If a furlong is 1/8 of a mile, and it is, then if you say each side is 12,000 furlongs, that city is 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles long, and 1,500 miles high. If you say, well, the whole city is 12,000 furlongs, then it's 375 by 375 miles, because that'll give you 12,000 all the way around. And the nation is not that big either. I just gave you, it's only 260 miles from north to south, and it's at its widest only 70 miles wide, and at the smaller measurement, the New Jerusalem is 375 miles long, 375 miles wide, and 375 miles high, and that's the small measurement. Now let me just show you what that would look like. And by the way, the wall around it is 144 cubits high, which means the wall is 216 feet high. Because that's not talking about the wall, that's talking about the city. Okay, so having said that, here is the International Space Station, that little fuzzy thing up in the dark top of your picture there. That's the view that they're taking down toward the Earth. Do you think you're a long ways up when you look at that? I mean, it looks like it, doesn't it? I mean, oh my goodness. So let me show you if you're talking about the short measurement, this is what it looks like. Here is the International Space Station. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, here, that's Spaceship 2, sorry. Here's the International Space Station. This is the orbit. Here's the Earth. And here's the International Space Station. That is 236 miles high into space. That actually varies a little bit. It gets up to about 240 something every once in a while. But it's around 235 to 245, somewhere in there, all the way around the Earth. Okay? Now, let me show you where the New Jerusalem would sit if it was sitting on that scale. That is the New Jerusalem. And folks, that's at the small distance. That is 375 miles high. Did the verse say, and the length and the breadth and the height of it are equal? It did. So if we take the small number, you have something sitting larger than the land of Israel, sitting up that high into space. You want to see if it's the big measurement? Thought you'd be interested to see that. Here is the earth. This green, that's 100 kilometers. That's the Earth's atmosphere. After 100 kilometers, you get, I need oxygen. Okay? 388 kilometers. Here is the height of the International Space Station. Now watch right here, because this is where I'm importing the New Jerusalem. I couldn't put it on the other one because the scale wasn't big enough. There's the New Jerusalem. So you can see, here's the International Space Station. That is almost 6.5 times higher than the space station that's in orbit around the planet. If the rabbis are right, and that measurement is the New Jerusalem 1,500 miles each way. Now, let's forget about height for a minute. By the way, I'm going to make a point about that in just a moment. But let's forget about height for a moment, and let's talk about the breadth and length of the city. Because the problem, as Clifford immediately defaulted that, he went, that's bigger than the land of Israel. Both measurements are bigger than the land of Israel. So you can see, if you think the map changed, that may solve your problem of how large the land is. Okay? And by the way, what I've just shown you is exactly why the commentators all say that passage over there in Revelation 21 cannot be taken literally. And I want to show you what they say. We'll run through it real fast. Barnes is a guy. He's well known. He wrote a big commentary, and here's what he says. Of course, this must preclude all idea of there being such a city literally in Palestine. This is clearly a figurative or symbolical representation, and the idea is that the city was on the most magnificent scale and with the largest proportions, and the description here is adopted merely to indicate this vastness without any idea that it would be understood literally. In other words, he's saying when John wrote that, he didn't think anybody would take that literally. He put in 12,000 furlongs, and it was as wide as it was long, as it was high, and he did 12,000 furlongs so everybody would go, what? He's just saying it's really big. But it kind of begs the question, doesn't it? Why a specific number? Why 12,000? Why not 10,000? You know, why that? And why furlongs? So, here's the next one. This is the People's New Testament Commentary. I suppose that these vast dimensions, a number 12 times 1,000, which both are favorite Hebrew numbers, are intended to indicate the vastness of the city rather than its exact size. He's basically saying the same thing that Barnes said. Now, here's the next one. According to this representation, the height of the city, not of the walls, would be 375 miles. You know what we know? He already believes that the 12,000 is the total around the city. He's not thinking it's per side. So we already know that that's what he's thinking about that, because he used 375 miles. Of course, this cannot be understood literally. And the very idea of a literal fulfillment of this shows the absurdity of that method of interpretation. You know what he's doing here? He is using the fact that the city would be too big, so you can't. everybody that talks about believing the Bible literally is just off base, because here's an example of why you can't do that. That's what he's saying. The idea intended to be conveyed by this immense height would seem to be that it would contain countless numbers of inhabitants. That's his take. And now, it is true that such a structure has not existed, and that a city of such height may seem to be all out of proportion, but we are to remember that this is a symbol. See, he's not going to take it literally. And that, considered as one mass or pile of buildings, it's a city, right? Not a building, it's a city. It may not be out of proportion. The idea of vastness and capacity is the main idea designed to be represented. The image before the mind is that the numbers of the redeemed will be immense. He's just saying, he's saying the city is really big because there's going to be a lot of saved people in it. And now lastly, A.T. Robertson's word picture. A.T. Robertson is no longer alive, but he hasn't been dead too awfully long, but he was considered to be the greatest English-speaking Greek grammarian ever. That's how when you go to college and you're learning the Greek, you use Robertson's work. He was just considered the authority. Here's what he says. It is not clear whether the 15,000 miles, 12,000 furlongs, is the measurement of each of the four sides or the sum total. See, he was like us. You know what? It's not clear which one of these it is. Some of the rabbis argued that the walls of the New Jerusalem of Ezekiel would reach to Damascus, and the height would be 1,500 miles high. It is useless to try to reduce the measurements or to put literal interpretations upon this highly wrought symbolic language. Surely, the meaning is that heaven will be large enough for all, as Jesus said in John 14:1, without insisting on the materialistic measurement of a gorgeous apartment house full of inside rooms. What he's referring to is where Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions." And he's saying Jesus didn't go to the trouble to give you how big the house was or how many mansions were in there. He just said there's going to be enough room for everybody. And that's all John's doing in Revelation 21. But John does say that that city is going to come down from God out of heaven. And he does measure it. I mean, he was given a reed. Why go to the trouble to say, and the angel was given a golden reed to measure the city? Why not just say, and it looked like it was 12,000 by 12,000 by 12,000 furlongs. But instead he goes to this, he actually gives you details of an angel that has been assigned the task to measure the city, and then he reports the measurement. Now, I'm not going to give you any more. I cited these because almost everybody. So if you're going to look at the New Jerusalem as it sits presently over the land of Israel, let me now show it to you on a map that shows you the smaller measurement. That it is 375 by 375. Now, we're forgetting the height for now. We're just talking about the length and the breadth. And here it is. There is the map I gave you before that showed you that it's 260 miles long and 70 miles wide at the widest part. Now I'm going to set the New Jerusalem down on top of that in its smaller form. And that orange box would be the New Jerusalem. Can you see it? It looked good on my computer. It didn't show up like, can you see it? Okay. You can see that's the small measurement. It's way bigger than the land of Israel. Would you like to see it on the big measurement? So what we're going to have to do is I'm going to have to back you up, because here we've just got Israel, a little bit of Egypt and Jordan in focus. Now I've got to back you up and show you the Middle East. So here's the map, so you don't get lost. Here's the Mediterranean, and this little rust color right here, that is the land of Israel. See, here's those two, there's the Suez, Aqaba. You see the Sinai Peninsula there? All right. So I'm going to put down the small measurement. There it is. If it's 375 by 375 miles, that's the small measurement right there. That's what we saw that just in a closer up on the previous slide. Here's the big measurement. If you say 1,500 by 1,500, now you're all the way down here at the tip of Ethiopia, all the way up to the southern end of Turkey, and from about the midpoint, I put it here because the boundary of the land was the Nile. So I set the border of it right over here on the Nile. And then that goes all the way over to most of Iran. Now, either way, it doesn't matter. Now, you may be looking at it and going, 1,500 just looks too big. Folks, 375 is too big. So, are you thinking it can't be 1,500 because God could build a city 375, but He couldn't build one 1,500? It's no difference, is it? You know, I remember talking with a friend of mine one time, and he said, it's not that nothing's too hard for God. Nothing's hard. I mean, that's pretty true, isn't it? It's almost like God could do this, but like, whoo, I just almost couldn't. That was hard. It was almost too hard. I just couldn't do it. God doesn't operate that way. It's just as easy for Him to do one as the other. All right, now, again, this is not a discussion about which one of those is right. I'm showing you both of them here. But the reason I'm telling you about this is because if those two verses in Judges chapter 5 and Psalm 68 were really talking about a reshuffling of the geography on the planet, then they would say what you're looking at here as the land of Israel is not really what it was, but it would be something much different. In fact, not just the land areas changed, but they believe also the water areas changed. And so if you rearranged it back to the time of Abram, then you know what? You'd have a big portion there. But I have to tell you, if it's 1,500, I mean, if the whole area, by the way, if that's just the part with the New Jerusalem, you do understand that out there in the kingdom, the Bible doesn't just talk about Israel being one big city, the New Jerusalem. It talks about other cities too.
In Israel?
Yeah. I mean, in the kingdom, it does talk about other things that are there. So you'd have to have a land area that could accommodate the New Jerusalem and the rest of the nation. And so I want to kind of bring this part, kind of sew this up, and then I want to make some comments about it. Here it is. No matter which number you think is correct, if you had a city, let's just do this one, that was that big, that was still taller than the orbit of the space station, would the whole world look at that and see a magnificence in God's city that would not be compared to with anything on the face of this earth? Absolutely would. I mean, even if you go with the smaller measurement. And by the way, the kings of the earth are going to come into that city. Do you think they would be impacted at all when that thing comes down from God out of heaven and sits on this earth and God takes up His residence in it? Oh my goodness. Do you think the world would be talking about that? Think it'd make the news? I mean, that'd be a magnificent structure. And you know what? Whichever of those sizes it is, it will be glorious enough for God to set up His residence in the midst of His creation. And it will do Him justice. So let me just give you the rest of the description of the city. Verse 10. And He carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. And it had a wall. Now we're not talking about the city, now we're talking about the wall. And the wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and the names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. Now he's going to tell us in a moment how big this wall is, but this wall has huge gates. You already know what the gates are made of, don't you? Gates of pearl. And you're going to find that he's going to lay this out where you're going to have 3 gates on each side of the city. But let's keep reading. By the way, what would that be like when you came up to that city and saw, he says, I saw a wall great and high, but he doesn't leave it there. He's going to give you a measurement for it in just a moment. But you have that big of a wall, which you'll see what it is in a moment, gates made out of a single pearl, and angels standing at every gate. You think they'd get anybody's attention when they walked up to the city? Unbelievable, the magnificence of the structure. Verse 14. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So you're going to get to see those 12 foundations. Now, verse 18. And the building of the wall of it was of jasper. And the building of the wall was of jasper. Now that's what we call a precious stone. All right? And the city was pure gold like unto clear glass. The whole city. Now, he says, verse 19, and the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stone. Now I just included these because it's in the verse. The first foundation was jasper, the second was sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth an emerald. I mean, can you imagine how much would be in a foundation of a wall that went at least 1,500 miles all the way around the city? And now, verse 21, and the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of one pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. Can you just imagine in your mind? I know our mind thinks in pictures, not in text. Can you imagine what it would be like when that single pearl gate opens up and you step onto a street of pure gold that is like transparent glass? Can you imagine what it would be like in there? Something the world certainly has never seen. And now chapter 21 and verse 3, and the city, well, you know what? I didn't include the verse, but the verse tells you that the height of the wall was 144 cubits. Standard cubit is 18 inches. So it's 1.5 feet, 1.5 times 144, or the wall is 216 feet high. Anybody want to take a big guess about what the commentators said about a wall that was 216 feet high? That is not to be taken literally, because you can't have a wall 216 feet high. You can't create something out of nothing either, but God's already done that one. And by the way, He's already built this city. It's just sitting up there, and He's going to bring it down here. Do you know why do you know why gold and silver and rubies and emeralds and jasper and sapphire, do you know why there's value to that? Do you know why men have placed value on that? Because that is in the third heaven, and God placed value on it. And when He made this earth, He put those same things here, because this is where He's going to set up His residence. Adam just didn't get up one day and go, I just think a diamond is valuable. That's just what I decide. Now, people think that, but all of that comes from where? From somewhere. Originally, men understood that God valued those things for what they were, and that's where the value came from originally. We don't look at that anymore. It's just like the stars. When you look up and you see the constellations, by the way, a friend of mine, when I was in Bible college, here's how smart I was. We're in Bible college, and he goes, do you think that the stars really are arranged in constellation? Do you think there's something to that? And I went, No, how do you, I mean, that's just some guy drawing lines between dots. Not anything, that's not anything. But then you get into the Bible and you see constellations called by name. And you talk about God making the stars. And by the way, those stars only line up when you're standing on this planet. You can't draw those same lines if you change your position, not just in the universe, but in this galaxy. God meant for those to be viewed from here. Now, I didn't understand it back then, but I've come to understand since then that the whole story has been told in the heavens. And when the Temple of Dendera over there, where they had that zodiac over there that started, and I'm just talking about I'm not talking about astrology, I'm talking about astronomy, different issue. I taught a series of lessons when I was in Glen Rose. I taught a series of lessons there, and one of the pastors in town criticized me. They said, he's over there teaching the occult. He's talking about astrology. It's not astrology. It is astronomy. It is the structure of the heavens. And that thing starts with Virgo, which is the Virgin, and it ends with Leo, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, coming back at his second advent. All the story in between is all of that. Gemini, the twins, is the dual nature of the Lord Jesus Christ. Very man and yet deity, very God. All of those things anyway, I'm just saying, the things that are put together here, men in their wisdom may not see it, but God knows what is going on with that. So I believe you do have a wall that's 216 feet high with 12 foundations, and each foundation is a precious stone. I do believe it's sitting in the third heaven up there. I realize what's happening by the course of this world. The course of this world is making it so that men do not believe these things because we're enlightened and educated and forward-thinking, and we're beyond all of those childhood issues of the Bible. And this is not just me being a homer. This is understanding what God was originally planning to do when He created this earth in the first place. And there's where me in the course of this world split off, because now there's the evolution that gets taught everywhere, that God is not the creator of this. And if you don't believe there's a creator, then you can do away with the fact that there's a God. And if you can do away with God, then you can live your life any way you want to. And anybody that doesn't like it is bigoted and narrow-minded and dangerous to society, and they need to be shut up. Which is why, when we get back to Romans 13, when we cast off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light, it's going to cause a response from the adversary. Because now we're actually going to be impacting his little pet doctrines and the things that he's trying to get established, and you are going to be looked at as out of step, and something's wrong with you mentally, and you believe these fairy tales. And you know what? That's part of the lie that's going to be propagated in this world to get you to come off of that. And Satan, if he can get us to do that, will have been successful. And he's going to not just work on us, he will go to work on the believing remnant out there to get them to think, you know what have I believed? What am I doing? And to cast it all aside. We immerse ourselves in this world, and what I'm asking us to do is immerse ourselves in the Word. And let that Word change our thinking to be like our Heavenly Father's. Okay, I have to finish this up. So that was the break buzzer.